Hold
Hello, and welcome everyone. We're really delighted to be here for today's webinar. Today's webinar is focusing on empowering your ERGs, your employee resource groups or affinity groups, or you might have another name for them. And the idea is that we're going to help you drive change and build inclusive workplaces, something that I think we all want. So welcome everyone. I think my colleague Tanya will be asking you to say hi and do let us know where you're logging in from. We always love it when we're hearing from people all over the globe. We're based in the UK, but it's great to hear how far our message reaches all over the world. For those who do not know me, my name is Jenny Garrett. I'm an award-winning career coach, author, and leadership trainer. And together with my wonderful team, we deliver impactful development to those from underrepresented groups to help them progress at work, as well as supporting all leaders to make inclusion happen. My latest and actually recently award-winning practical and empowering book is called Equality versus Equity, Tackling Issues of Race in the Workplace. So some of you will have made a small donation when you joined today's webinar. And I want to say a huge thank you on behalf of our social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens. Your donations go towards increasing resilience, inspiring, and raising aspirations in teenagers. And if anybody wants to find out more about Rocking Your Teens, please do go to rockingyourteens.com. Again, my colleague Tanya will be adding that link into the chat. So we're not completely sure who's joining us today. You could be a CEO, you could be a human resources professional, you could be a leader, you could be someone who stumbled across it and thought, I'll have a look, or you could be an employee resource group lead. And what we know is that employee resource group leads often feel under resourced and overwhelmed, sadly, because actually you're usually asked to do this on top of the day job. And because you're passionate about driving change, you do that with dedication and energy. But often you're juggling too much. You might have limited resources, such as a lack of budget, lack of admin support, maybe lack of platforms and processes to help you. You might be juggling your daily workload, which could lead to burnout, and also just navigating the complexities of organizations, influencing stakeholders, building relationships, driving meaningful change, which requires strategic thinking. These can all be huge challenges for you. So today we're going to think about what the challenges are, how to overcome them. And I'm joined by some amazing coaches to help us have this conversation. I'm joined by Subia, Suki, and Nita. They are all listed in the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, a directory which connects corporate organizations with coaches from the global majority, or you might use the language of ethnically diverse backgrounds. They are so experienced. They've been coaching formally for many years. They're highly qualified. And they're people I'm really proud to know. I'd vouch for every single one of them because they bring so much to the field of coaching and so much to their work. So the format of the session is that Subia, Nita, and Suki will introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them 3 or 4 questions, and then I'm going to hand over to you to ask your questions. While we're going through today's session, please feel free to type your questions in the chat, type your information in the chat, type your insights. We want this to be an interactive conversation where we all learn from each other. And we're going to be using the hashtag empowering your ERG. So feel free to share this on your socials using that hashtag empowering your ERG. So without further ado, I'd like to get our wonderful panelists and coaches to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with you, Suki.
Thank you, Jenny. I was so lovely listening to your voice. I was like in that zone. I am Suki Collins. I am an award-winning leadership coach who specializes in out-of-box thinking. Recently, I've started using more about red team thinking and black box thinking, because we now live in a world, I think, where we are resource strapped. So we need to look at how we can fine tune what resources we have. So this type of coaching is coming in hand at the moment, coming in hand. And I've been championing EDIB since 2005. So that's me. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you so much. And yes, and you're in Wales. Am I right, Suki?
I am. I'm in Swansea, and it's blue skies and beautiful golden day today. It's lovely.
I think it's important to represent Wales, isn't it? And call Wales out.
Thanks,
Nita,
Jenny.
no problem. Nita, I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, gosh, my throat. Welcome, everyone. I'm Nita, as Jenny sort of said. I work as a consultant, executive and leadership coach, and a facilitator, both in the UK and globally. And one of the works that I love doing in organizations, and I'll touch on the ERG experience that I have, is actually cultural change and creating leadership capability within organizations so that they can be more inclusive. That's where my sort of passion has always ridden itself, whether it's through coaching or whether it's through systemic change. Now, I've been involved in ERG for a long, long time at various levels. I won't go back how long it was. However, in the last 2-3 years, I was involved in an organization where they wanted to create an ERG, and they were very sort of instrumental in creating a diversity and equity and inclusive sort of progress within the organization, but they didn't have a structure. They didn't have a system or a voice within the organization, even though from the ground level, they were really powerful. So one of the things I and several colleagues of mine collectively helped them to shape various ERGs within the organization. And I can truly say that this organization took it all on board, gave them the resources, all the things that Jenny talked about, burnout, they're very conscious of it. I think they're quite unique because what they realized that their DEI progress would not have been done if it wasn't for the ERG's presence. So they gave them enormous amount of resources to be able to do that work.
Oh, what a fantastic story, and really good case study for others who are listening, who might be thinking, not sure where to start, not sure if this is going to work. It's great to hear those stories. We need more of them. And Sabia, last but definitely not least, please tell us about you.
Thank you, Jenny. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sobia Iqbal. I'm a career and leadership coach, mentor, supervisor, writer, and speaker. I'm very passionate about developing the next generation of diverse talent. In my experience, organizations often find it quite difficult to garner, strategically utilize, and operationalize diverse perspectives. And I love working on those complex challenges and supporting organizations to develop diverse talent through coaching, mentoring, and training.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. As you can see, I've got some heavyweights here. They've got so much to give. And I also wanted to say hello to everyone watching. I can see a few familiar names here. We've got Warner, we've got Nzinga, we've got Janet, we've got Janice, we've got Lucy, we've got Martin, Rosie, lovely to see you here, Kate. So fantastic. Thank you so much. And as we've said, this is a two-way conversation. Do feel free to type in the chat. Let us know if you have any questions or thoughts as well. So my first question is, drawing on your experience as executive coaches and leaders from diverse backgrounds, what specific challenges have you observed ERG leaders facing when trying to influence systemic change within organizations? And also, how do you think coaching can empower them to navigate those complexities? So we know there are a lot of challenges generally, but specifically when influencing systemic change, and how can coaching help and empower them? So I'm going to start with you, Nita. What do you think?
I think one of the things that, as a part of this question, empowering and how you navigate the complexity of the system, is being clear from an ERG perspective what it is you want to communicate. I think that is absolutely important in terms of the message and within the system, and understanding the system as it is and who are the stakeholders do they want to kind of influence, because there are going to be some stakeholders who can be real allies for them and others who may not be. In addition to that, I think being clear as to what your purpose is for ERG, and being an ERG, it's about being politically savvy, of being aware of what are some of the resistance and conflict that might arise within the system, because it's not going to be an easy journey, because people are going to be looking at, leaders are going to be, or managers are going to be looking, oh, they're taking time away from their work, their day work. How do you influence people? How do you influence your leaders and your managers that they can embrace this? So I think those are some of the ways that I would sort of say you can empower and navigate the complexity. Political savviness is absolutely essential, I think, as a part of an ERG.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And maybe not a skill people think of, because they probably think passion is enough. But clearly saying no, unfortunately, you need some other skills and qualities too. Sabir, what would you add to that?
So I've had the pleasure of group coaching quite a breadth of ERG leads, and they've all had similar themes by way of challenges. So lack of dedicated time, not much support across the system, difficulty building momentum, getting stakeholder buy-in. And to help with that, aligning and reflecting on the strategic objectives and the strategic language can help bridge that gap in understanding. The other challenge people have in ERG groups is it can be a great place to decompress and bring issues to light. However, not much action happening. So then I think, and then that can lead to stagnancy. So I think core coaching skills, aligning with personal and organizational values, can help us to feel reconnected to our sense of purpose, connection, build confidence and resourcefulness. And then also looking at it from a personal perspective, how can the ERG group support me in my development, and building relational networks across the system to support resilience. And I also think ethics and ethical considerations are important to support safe spaces, and coaching can do that for people to share knowledge of systemic issues that create obstacles. But it can really help organizations to nurture spaces where for listening, understanding, and supporting tangible actions that create meaningful engagement.
Thank you. What came to mind as I listened to you was this idea of aligning language. And if you're not typically a person who's in those most senior rooms, you might not know what the language is. So it sort of speaks to having senior stakeholders within the group who can help you with that language, doesn't it, really? Or the exposure that you might need, because you might, we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's such a key point. If you're not speaking the language of those key stakeholders, you're not going to be able to move forward. So thank you hugely for that point as well. And Suki, what would you add?
What I was going to add was very personal, because when you ask ERG, you come across people who don't want change because it's resistance to change. And that's like most of us, I think, don't want change. But unfortunately, we live in a VUCA world where change is inevitable. It's going to happen, but it's how you overcome that. And I think as coaches, what we can do for these leaders is provide tools for them to empower them against this unknown change that they're going to. As Nita and Sophia said, I think it is a big hill or a big mountain to climb. And as coaches, I think we need to give them tools to empower them, and also give them tools, I think, to coach other people as well as coaching teams and groups as well. Because when you're working with them, because rather than telling them what you think that I should do, you should do, I think it's nice to have that conversation as a group with a group of people to empower them to be able to help you then overcome the challenges that you are facing. And also, I think as you coach other people, you become more self-aware of your own blind spots as well. And then you can also develop, I think, systems thinking and interconnectedness. I could never say that word, with more people you work with as well. So that's important as well, which I've noticed does work. And it's almost like, I think you both talked about, and you talked about, Jenny, I think is empowering the stakeholders to become part of your journey almost. So I think that's important as well.
Yes, I'm on a mission around clear language, Suki. So I'm going to ask you to explain what VUCA is, just in case anyone, and they might have thought you were swearing anyway. Yeah, if you could possibly just tell us what the acronym stands for.
Oh my God, now you got me. I've used it so many times. It was developed, I think, in the Army or Navy, I can't remember, in the Americans.
Yes.
It's about a volatile world that we live in, constantly changing. It's almost like, I think from my gal, it's almost like you're walking on jelly, full stop. It's like that, I think. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, it's something volatile, uncertain.
Complexity and ambiguity.
And ambiguity.
Complexity and ambiguity.
Thank you, ladies.
That's what we mean by VUCA, just in case anyone was wondering. Thank you so much. Really great to hear. Well, not great for everyone that we've got all of these obstacles, but I think it's good to have them outlined. And what I'm hearing from all of you is there are different types of coaching, whether that's one-to-one coaching, helping someone with coaching skills, group coaching, different ways that coaching can help in this process. I also want to bring Lorna's voice into the room. Lorna said, I'm finding the biggest issues for ERGs are the diverse perspectives, both within the ERG and the wider organization, as to what the purpose of the group is, what the challenges are that need solving, and the positioning of the ERG within the organizational context. So that's, that's sort of that starting point, isn't it? Who are we? What are we here to do? That seems to be a key element. And hi, Kelly, great to see you here. Welcome. Martin, thanks for your question. We'll come back to it. Appreciate that you're adding questions in. So my next question, although we started to answer it a little bit, is more about coaching. As you are all very experienced coaches, how can coaching help ERG leaders build resilience and avoid burnout while tackling the often emotionally taxing and challenging work of driving inclusion initiatives? And we know that typically ERG leads are often from the underrepresented group. And then so people come to them with all of their challenges that actually probably triggering and resonate with them, as well as them having to sort of fight those internal battles. So there is an awful lot they have to deal with. I'm going to start with Suki this time. What do you think? How can coaching help, particularly around resilience and burnout? Sorry.
I think no. It's important, I think, too. I think as we spoke, I think before, it's important to know what we are doing and what we are doing, but also is what my role is in this. I think burnout happens when we try to be superhumans. And also, I always tell people, always allow space for thinking, because you always need that. That's where your self-care comes in. I think some of the conversations we had before we came onto the screen is that Generation Z now looking for self-care and well-being. But we tend not to do that, because we always think when we go into one of these commitments or what we're going to do, we just think we can do everything. And we can't do that. So as coaches, I think what we need to do with the ERG leaders is make sure that we empower them to look after themselves, mindset as well. I think one of the things I develop with other people is a growth mindset. It's like saying that I'm not going to have a closed mindset, because closed mindset doesn't look for possibilities or opportunities. But if you develop a growth mindset, then you start to look for opportunities where there aren't many opportunities. I know it sounds a ridiculous thing to say, but the more you develop it, it becomes that. As a coach, you can work with the ERG leaders on that, to develop that. So they can't just turn around and say, oh, I can't do that, I haven't got the fund, I can't do that. And you can say, right, this is what I need to do. How am I going to do it? And coaching is a powerful tool in that. So I think that is our role, to make sure we provide that for them, that platform.
Thank you so much. And that's that sense of when sometimes we can feel that every door is closed to us, and through that coaching, that sense of no, there's more, there's opportunity here. Can be so helpful. Subia, I'll go to you next.
Thank you. I think it's important to have clarity on what your ERG is about, like, so the why, what, how, but also through group coaching, what I found is that the power of bringing different ERG groups together, and often there's common purpose, there's shared goals and challenges, and together we're greater than the sum of our parts. And then that can really support in, the risk of burnout, but also this idea of moral injury, where you're expected to do the emotional heavy lifting for the organization. I knew Jenny would ask me for a definition, so I've looked one up, but moral injury is the lasting emotional, psychological, social, behavioral, and spiritual impact of actions that violate someone's core moral values and behavioral expectations of self or others. And that's Litz and all 2009.
Wow.
Brilliant. Thank you. Appreciate the definition. And Nita, your thoughts?
I think there are things that both Suki and Subia have actually said that which are very important. Self-care. I guess where my starting point would be asking the ERG leader, what's their rationale for doing this work? What is it that they want to bring of themselves and to add to the organization, to the ERG itself? So starting with looking at themselves, a bit like what Suki sort of saying, having a growth mindset, understanding, know thyself. I think that is a very, very important element. And what's motivating me from doing that, and what might be my shadow side of where I might get hooked into, and being less than resourceful when I'm actually leading a ERG. I think those are the elements are quite important. On the other side, I think when people come into this ERG lead role, they're a part of a community. They're a part of a community that they can lean in. So they're not alone in that. And it's about remembering that they might have broad shoulders. There are other people who can be allies for them. And individually, I think to avoid burnout, I have a philosophy that says, it's hard to be compassionate to others if we can't be compassionate to ourselves. I think it's hard. And one of the things that I think we need, even as a ERG leader, is to practice, I think, fierce self-compassion and have clear boundaries and say, no, I can't do this, but let me pass it on to someone else. I think boundaries is a really important element of our own growth and development, and in taking care of ourselves so that we don't get burnout, basically. And the last thing I would sort of say is that, along the way of being a leader, there's going to be mistakes and failure, and seeing it as a part of what Suki was saying, as a part of a growth mindset, and learning to have self-inquiry in regards to that, I think.
Love
you.
that. Love that. So really great
Absolutely.
points from everyone. Particularly boundaries is something that's really helped me in my life. So yeah, I've definitely testify to that point. We've got a couple of points here that I just want to draw on. I think it might actually be one from one from Nzinga. Burnout can often happen because of the expectations of the organization and senior leaders not being adequately managed. So yeah, how do you manage other people's expectations of what is realistic? Is a good point.
Yeah.
And Rosie says, this is something I focused on heavily in my last role. I looked after 10 ERGs, and it was about bringing them together to work collaboratively whilst keeping their individual identity and purpose. Brilliant. And Kelly says she loves that boundaries are important in everything we do. But I think for many ERG leaders I speak to, they seem to forget this. And a last point from Nzinga, often ERG leads are also juggling day jobs that they need to meet targets for, as well as the work needs to be done as an ERG lead. There is more that can be done to support leads with resources and collaboration. Absolutely. We completely agree. Couldn't agree more.
No.
Okay. So as another point, another question here from me, what coaching strategies do you find most effective in helping ERG leaders develop their influencing skills and build strong relationships with key stakeholders, including senior leadership, in order to gain buy-in and get support for their initiatives? So yeah, what are the strategies that really work when it comes to influencing, particularly those who might be more senior? I'm going to start with you, Sabia.
Thank you. I think now's a good opportunity to recommend this book, The Incredible Power of Staff Networks by Sharon Inko Taria. And she's got a lot of tools, techniques, and models to use, like, for example, how to start and sustain a staff network, she calls it. So establishing the need, getting your evidence, test the waters, speak to other staff networks, build a business case, and build on the foundation. And that's an iterative process. But to answer your question specifically around coaching skills, I think it's really useful for everyone to develop core coaching skills, like asking pertinent questions, active listening, referring back to the data and the strategic plans to drive what's possible. So even if you look at the exec summary or the strategic plan, that can be enough to give you a sense of how what you're doing aligns with the greater organizational goals. Utilizing and gaining input from different departments like the corporate office for business case templates, comms, marketing. You don't need to do it all yourself. And this goes back to the whole idea of relational networks. And I think it's incredibly important to build strategic allies, sponsors, and board accountability. People who are actually invested in and actively participate and talk about ERG, its purpose or their purpose and benefits, on visible forums, not just behind the scenes, and making yourself more visible by going to employee forums that gives you exposure. So very much making like that co-creative approach.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's so comprehensive there. I'm hoping everyone was scribbling all of that down because there's an awful lot you gave. So thank you so much. And I totally advocate for Sharon. She's amazing and her book is fabulous. And she also has I think a special Staff Networks Day of the year to celebrate staff networks. So do look that up. Nita, what would you add?
I think what Sabia has actually sort of added on things, being aware not only at the level of systemic and the structure and the system, also relational. I think that's all. Understanding the word I use, 2 words I use, are politically savvy. Being understanding what's the system that you're operating within. I think the other coaching strategies that individuals can choose is, because it's a learning and a development opportunities, is to take risks, not to take reckless risks, risks, but take some risks where, you know, you might get some feedback and sort of think, well, I could have done that differently. And I think that's a place of coming from a position of curiosity, being curious and asking, you know, rather than saying, oh, that manager is a dragon. They won't. Ask them, you know, position the questions in such a way that you can be curious about them. You know, what is it that keeps them stuck, or what is it that doesn't get them engaged in this ERG process, basically. And you know, just a couple of other things, understanding, you know, how at the same time, you know, where can you be improving your own leadership skills, and all the other things that that was sort of just mentioned around building fantastic coaching skills, you know, asking those questions, listening, you know, actively listening, and giving feedback. Actually, I learned something last week. I was running a session and somebody said, don't use feedback, use observation. So one of the things our client has now adopted, they don't say, I want to give you feedback. They say now, this is what I'm observing. And by using that word, observing, it makes people a lot less defensive in what they're hearing, really. So one of the key things is use the language that can also move things as well.
Such a good point, actually, because many organizations say they're terrible at giving feedback, but I'm sure they're great at observing or even noticing. I've noticed might be another.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, really great. Thank you. And Suki, what would you add?
I think I only got a few things to add here. Only one, I think, Jenny, I can think of. They're both covered it beautifully. One of the things that the ERG is, I think it fits in with the question in the chat as well. It says, how important is the visible support of the board in legitimizing the ERG within the system it operates? I think in order to do that, I think you as the ERG person need to become a brand almost, in the sense of you become the expert. And I think as coaches, we can develop that confidence in that person to communicate all the networks they need to do. I mean, when you say brand, everybody goes, oh my God, what does that mean? But it's you as a person that talks and walks the same talk as, I think it's like what Nita and Sabia said, it's about you as a person can influence and make a difference. And if you stand up and say something, people will listen and you influence. That's what the coach can do for you, give that confidence back to you to lead and make the change. It's not easy out there, but you can do it, but you've got to believe in yourself. That is your brand.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love that. That was a real a clarion call and inspiring message for all of us. I'm like, I'm ready to get out there now, Suki. We can take on the world. Does anyone else have any points they'd want to add to Martin's question in terms of this idea about the importance of the visible support of the board and the executive team in legitimizing the ERG within the system?
I think it's very important to have a visible support from the board, because we all observe what leaders do and what they say and how they behave. I think it's a very, certainly from the project, ERG that I was mentioning earlier on, the fact there was top level commitment to get ERGs, different ERGs in place, I think gave it a more legitimacy and power for them to feel that, you know, they had a voice. So I think the board is absolutely important in that. They need to walk their talk. They're creating this. ERGs are a part of a system. They're not sitting outside of that system. So, and I think the board role is absolutely essential in that.
Fantastic. Okay, our final question. So everyone, please do start to get your questions ready if you have any that you'd like to add into the chat. So question 4, from your perspective, how can coaching support ERG leaders in developing a clear vision, setting realistic goals, and measuring the impact of their efforts to create lasting and meaningful change within their organizations? And I guess it speaks to the point that was made earlier by Lorna, when perhaps the goals aren't clear and everyone's got competing ambitions. So how could coaching help gain that gain that clarity, gain that vision, set those goals, and very importantly, measure the success, measure the difference that it makes. So I'm going to start with you, Sabia.
I think the power of coaching is that it creates a safe, reflective space to get clarity on all those important things, the goals, the outcomes, the priorities, actions, progress on actions. And builds that momentum, and that's just compounded when it's done in a group coaching environment. In my experience, on a very practical note, it's very useful to have like a brief business case, even if it's like a 2-3 page slide deck with your mission and your priorities and outcomes and targets and milestones and how, what progress you're making. And I think it's incredibly important to co-create that and test that with your key stakeholders. So there's a level of accountability there, as opposed to, well, why haven't you done that? It's a 2-way or 3-way or many-way conversation. And I really like the whole action learning cycle. So, you're reflecting, you're taking action, you're learning from and reviewing that action, and you're just iterating. And it's more of a we rather than I approach. And I think that's incredibly important to sustain resilience. And again, just getting clarity on the why, what, how. And by doing that and taking consistent action, it builds confidence and develops your skill sets. So, for example, learning to chair meetings and speak to managers and making a business case and having difficult conversations across the organizations. It's all about developing yourself in the process whilst nurturing more systemic change, because at least you're seeing that the systemic stuff is the long-term game, but the more immediate results might be the personal development that you're seeing, and that can help sustain your own resilience and motivation and build networks and of support around that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Some really good ideas on how coaching can make that difference. Suki, what would you add?
I think it's going back to listening to the two ladies and yourself. Is that why again, isn't it? What is our why? If you don't start with that, nothing falls into place. And one of the models or framework that I like to use with people going through change is the 7S, McKinsey 7S model, because that sets out the framework easy for each of the, and now you're going to ask me what those stands for, 7S.
No,
so
that's okay. You won't. You've said they're 7 S's. Someone can Google them. Yeah, don't worry.
I was just racking my brains. I just used it automatically. And I think it looks at different aspects of it. And I think it looks at the structures, the systems, and I think the style, the skills, strategy. It's all there, isn't it? Mapped out for you. And the center of that is the shared values. And I think it's easy having a framework for me is that each of them you can then measure and evaluate and tweak what needs to be done. Because don't forget, it's all interconnected, the whole changes. We're talking about systemic change here. You can't just change one thing and expect other things to follow suit. It doesn't work like that. It's the whole 360-degree perspective, isn't it? And I think 7S gives that tool and framework for people to do. And coaching is much better in that sense. You are contextualizing and is contained. And I think it gives that confidence for the individual as well to move on. And oh my God, I can do it. I can plan it. So that gives that confidence as well.
Brilliant. And Nita?
I guess, one of the things I want to say is that, when we're talking about coaching isn't something that coaches do to the individuals. Coaching is a two-way process. So the question I would ask, someone who's an ERG leader who wants to sort of develop themselves is what do they want from this role that they're embarking on? What is it, what is it part of? Is it part of their kind of legacy? What's their motivator? So there's a level of understanding the self, I think, along with the system that they're working in. What other behaviors do they want to explore around, which are development for themselves? How are they going to hold themselves accountable to, how they're kind of showing up? What kind of loop back observation or noticing are they going to be eliciting from their peers or from the organization? I think are quite important part of learning about ourselves as well. And I think one of the other areas, both the previous people have been giving a very comprehensive answer, is about benchmarking. I think it's about ERGs have been around for at least, I can think about the 80s for me when I was first involved. You don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of the ERG. However, what your motivation is going to be an important element of it. And it's not something that you're doing only to the organization, is what's in it for you as well, and bearing that in mind as you're sort of kind of going along, being an ERG leader really. And it's also about, I think, what's been touched on, developing skills. I think skills, I usually put that quite low down in my level when I'm looking at coaching, because I think the main thrust is getting an individual to take ownership of themselves and what they really want, and to be an agency for themselves as a part of becoming an ERG leader.
Something we touched on when we was discussing this previously was this idea of legacy. And I just wondered if you wanted to speak to that a bit more, Nita.
I mean, one of the things, I've done quite a lot of 360 tools, and one of the tools that was quite interesting they had is legacy. What am I leaving behind? Which leads to why do I want to do? It's the why question. Why do I want to do this? And what do I want to leave behind? So that when the next person comes, they can pick up, what's the impact? Because as ERG leaders, we do want to make an impact. We do want to leave a legacy of the wonderful work that we've done. And I think that also feeds into our own sense of what we're looking at is empowering ourselves, but also empowering ERG. So I think whether you're 20 something or whether you're 80 something or 60 something, I think legacy is such a core part of who we are really. But we don't pay much attention to that because we see it as a grand thing. I think legacy can be a very small thing as well. And small, I don't mean it's to be minimizing it, but it can be a small impact that we make.
Wonderful. Yeah, such a great point. Thank you for making it. So we've got the next question on the screen from Rebecca. Is there any advice you'd give to someone trying to set up an ERG in an organization that hasn't had one before? And anyone can answer this. We don't all have to answer it, but it's anyone.
What I was saying earlier on, Jenny, there are organizations who have set up ERGs. Go and talk to their network. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then what you can do is help to tailor it to your own organization. And some of the things that we said earlier on, what's your purpose? What are some of the structures that you need to have? What are the resources? What are some of the pinch points or the resistance that you might come across really? I would say it's talking to other people, not just one organization, but maybe 2 or 3 organizations. I know for a fact lots of banks have ERGs, so they're a good resource for people to kind of tap into.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just reading Nzinga's point, I'm not sure which point it was, but she said, this is a brilliant point. People buy into people, and with a strong personal brand, it was that point, you are able to influence and occupy spaces that need your presence. So just putting up on that point. So we've got here from Kelly. You might feel that you've answered this already, but if anyone wants to say anything else, how can you get the top level management commitment if it's not fully on board for your ERG?
I think answering both Rebecca and Kelly, I think you need that buy-in, don't you, from the top board? I mean, I sit on a board, and if somebody says they're going to change something, the question I ask is, what does it mean for us as an organization? How much is it going to cost? What impact is it? What is going to make to our bottom line? All that stuff needs to be answered. And I think in our discussion, we talked about business plan. I think Sabia mentioned, Anita mentioned plans. You have to give why. Again, it's going back to what is going to gain by doing what you're doing. You can't just go ahead and say, I'm going to change it. What does that mean? You're looking at the future. What does that mean for the future? So if you actually want to buy in from the board, for me, I always want to see, as a vice chair of the board, saying, right, we're going to grow. Are we going in the right direction? We want to make sure we are making money, but is that, even if it's a charity, you still need to make money to maintain what you're doing, and it's going to be effective, efficient, and also don't lose your brand again in that as an organization. So that's important again. So I think these are the things you need to consider for the buy-in from the board and the chief execs.
I think, we talk about belonging, we talk about psychological safety. Again, there's a lot of research around that says when people feel they are a part of something, engaged in something, and have a sense of safety and psychological belonging, it does improve the bottom line. And it creates innovation. Again, there's a lot of research around is when people feel that they've seen and they can contribute, innovation does grow within an organization. So this is another platform which can improve the bottom line. It may not be directly, but people want to contribute more when they feel heard and seen, I think. So this would be one of the influences that I think that can be put across to the board, really.
Brilliant. So another point from Kate, and this is an interesting challenge. So we've got board and senior exec commitment, but what if it's the staff who are not, really engaging with the employee resource group? So, the women don't want to come to the women's group. Those with the disability don't want to go to the group for those with the disability. What do you do then? Any thoughts? Has anyone come across this?
I think people, it's okay for people not wanting to be labelled as that or to be categorized. But often the challenges and themes within the employee resource groups are reflective of what's going on in the wider organization in terms of reflecting on the challenges, so high workforce turnover, culture issues, bullying, harassment, like the worst, and that when things are going not very good at all. And it's I think that's what the challenge is. I think people don't want to be almost marginalized and we're having to do that. I just want to get my head down and get on with my career without having to, but there might be issues pertinent to them. So that's a way of bringing those challenges to a broader audience and having a bigger conversation about it in terms of addressing those challenges and how it's going to benefit the organization. But for me, it's not just about the ERG, it's about that's part of a whole, and how do we create opportunities to have the conversation inside and outside of the ERG, but the ERG can just be a catalyst for the conversations that need to happen.
Yeah,
thank you.
Touch on that. I think you need to build trust. That's what it comes down to, doesn't it? It's that trust. Without it, it doesn't matter. You could be saying, I want this done. But if that trust and understanding, and I think it's you touched on it, if you don't get the buy-in from the stakeholders, it's almost like another initiative just being branded from above. It doesn't mean anything to me. But what is in it for me? What am I going to gain? What am I going to see? I think it's like everybody said, it's all normally it's a system. It's like something's happening somewhere that is showing up where there's an opportunity for people to speak and show. So it's almost some symptom somewhere hidden. So I think it's about going back to that 7S model again. You've got to look at every possible S's and see, am I ticking everything right? Is everything happening as it should be happening? Am I forgetting something that I should have taken into account? I think that is important as well for the buy-in from everybody as well. It's got to be everyone for the journey or none at all, because it's not going to work otherwise for the inclusive society to be built. I'm not getting really off my high horse here.
No, I, from my perspective, I think it's a data point. So this is a data, and introducing ERGs. What Suki said was saying, maybe there's a lack of trust. What's in the culture? It's the data. What is the data telling the exec and the board members that they have to listen to and pay attention to? I think those are important elements. And we're all, when we're introducing things, we're all in transition and looking at, what is it and why are we want to introduce that, and is it, and I hate the word initiatives. I loathe it. When organizations talk to me about initiative, I completely turn off because I just don't think it means anything really. And that it's seen as an overall strategy, as a part of, I don't know, well-being or engaging everyone. So I think culturally, it's a cultural change, and you have to look at it from that. And where does it fit in the rest of the system? Has this just been plucked, or is it aligned to their DEI policy? Is there resources being given, or groups have been, just been set up and so forth? And people might feel, I don't want to go there because my manager might think I'm, too radical, for example. So all of those things, count in that data point, I think.
Wonderful. Great point. So this is the very last question that we have time for from an Nzinga. How can ERGs move away from performative and tokenistic gestures in the absence of resources and budget? And we know that's always a challenge. They don't have money to get the best speakers or get a training program or do the research they want to do, but they want to do something meaningful. Are there any examples of good practice or any thoughts about how they can be innovative or use even tech to help them?
I think it's about this. If they haven't got resources, or they've only got limited resources, I think it's about working with what you have at that time, and then looking at and building from there, really. And because I was talking to somebody who's a part of an ERG, and they said they started off, being given a lot of limited resources, but 2 years on, their resources have actually expanded. So you have to sort of work with what you have, and then show the visibility and the success of it, both for the people who attend the ERG and also in terms of the organization itself. So I think it's a tough one, really. I don't think ERGs now, and that's just my perception, are seen as tokenistic, but maybe I'm not. I have this perspective, but I'd love to hear what other people's perspective is.
I agree. I think it's valuing ERG and ERG members and celebrating and championing the benefits of and the successes, like you've said. So if you're getting opportunities for career advancement or visibility or exposure in a way that you wouldn't do otherwise, whilst also making a difference in a systemic way, like for me, that's about creating win-wins. So even if there's limited resources, it's like, how can you incentivize people and how can you celebrate and talk about it? So that's, again, if people have stereotypes or don't know what an ERG does, part of it is like championing and talking about the successes and benefits of being part of an ERG.
Brilliant.
I think you can do so much with limited resources because you've got all your stakeholders out there. Just get them all involved and start showcasing them and believe in yourself as well, that you can make a difference because you are out there to make a difference. And if you don't believe in yourself, it's our growth mindset again, isn't it? If you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to make a difference. So you've got to do it. Start small. I think it's that Chinese proverb, you have to start 1,000 miles journey with the first step or one step or whatever, isn't it? Start making it small, and that ripple effect is like, I think Nita said, the resources came 2 years later. So they must have been showing some wins, and so, there's got to be something that showcase that. So start small and start making a difference, and just believe in yourself and bring that into that room when you're in that room, and just influence everybody to make that change. And you can do it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And one last thing, I think, you can get speakers to come on talk at ERG and they won't charge. I've known lots of people who can be very, they present at ERGs and use that, influence that, we're a small ERG, we'd love it, but you can't pay you anything, and many people will, I think many people will come along and do a presentation or a small session to, to engage the group that they're talking to.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not an advocate of not paying speakers, especially for underrepresented groups, but I hear you. But I hear your point, and of course, people out of the kindness of their heart will do it. I was just thinking there will be a resource of people in your organization who have stories to tell, and it's not always obvious either. So you might have someone who looks like they're from the majority group, but they might have a child, a sister, whoever might have some other diversity in their family. And hearing their stories, that's really powerful. That's typically free. Books. I know many organizations use their ERG as a bit of a book club, and they'll read a book for the month or get the book, and then they'll talk about it. You could extend it beyond your ERG. You could do an internal survey. You will have some Google Forms is free. Get a Google form, survey the organization, present back some data that's informative and helpful to the organization. TED Talks are fantastic. Organize a TED watch party. So, there's a TED Talk on the topic of your ERG, invite everyone, watch the TED Talk, divide everyone up into table groups, have a conversation. There's so much you can do that doesn't cost any money. Of course, you want to do all the big stuff, but start with those things that you can do that are manageable, that are low resource in time as well as money, and build from there. Get the momentum and get enthusiasm and get volunteers and more people. Don't try and do it on your own, is what I would say. Thank you. There have been some great thoughts, some great comments. I do encourage everyone to read all of the comments, because there's some fantastic people I personally know here who are sharing their nuggets of wisdom as well in the chat. So as well as the amazing wisdom we've had from our coaches, there's lots of experience in the chat as well. And I want you to look at that. But we've come to the end. It always goes so very, very quickly. Yes, I want to start just by saying thank you. Thank you so much, Sabia, Suki, Nita. You've really given us a lot to think about. You've given us some really practical and helpful knowledge. And please do reach out to them. Reach out to all three of them. They're listed on the Diverse Executive Coach Directory. They are also, you can just link with them on LinkedIn. And we also have a Diverse Executive Coach Directory group. Page actually on LinkedIn. So find us and follow and find out what we're doing, because we have very regular webinars, and we're also going to have some face-to-face events next year where you can meet our amazing coaches too. So I hope you found it useful, everyone that's been here. We do have a short survey that we'd love you to complete, just to tell us what was useful, what you'd like to hear from us in the future, Tanya will add that link in the chat. And lastly, we have our next event and our final event for the year on the 12th of December. So do book in straight away so you don't miss out on that amazing event, which is focused on developing psychological safety. You know, the organization that perhaps is not getting anyone to sign up to their ERGs, perhaps there's a little bit more work that needs to be done to create psychological safety in the organization. And it's work we all have to do and constantly have to work on. So we look forward to seeing you on the 12th of December at 12:30, talk about psychological safety with some more amazing fellow coaches. But until then, thank you so much, everyone. We've really loved your engagement and it's been fabulous. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care. Lovely.